Okay, I think a fresh set of eyes and a fresh voice. We're due for it. And I love the notion of foresight. And Rowena Morrow, who's joining us now, is a foresight strategist. Hello, Rowena. I'll just do a little bit of intro, and then very keen to consider your take on what we've heard so far. And one of this, I love this phrase you've used in describing what you do, this new future state. And the whole notion of state is an interesting thing, given what we've talked about, and how people develop through that, and this reconceptualisation that seems to have emerged in your work with this hope that sits behind it. So, first of all, really keen, thank you and welcome, and really keen, Rowena, to if there's anything you wanted to respond to that's come out of the discussion so far, just let her rip. And yeah, love to approach your provocation as well, which I know is in the stream. And Kristen, thank you so much for just sharing those perspectives from all the participants. So hopefully we'll be able to address some of those. But so from your perspective, Rowena, the theme of discovery, and what does that mean for you?
So firstly, thank you very much for having me, and I am loving the conversation. So to hear multiple people, both in the chat and obviously online, talk about letting things go. So foresight and futures, yes, it's about creating the new. And as Kristen said first up, it's also sometimes about looking at what we're bringing from the past and letting that go. And Kristen, I think you're absolutely spot on. I think there is I'm starting to talk about social trauma. There is some trauma in this, and the grief that we're experiencing, both through the futures that are no longer going to be ours, both on a personal, organisational and community level. And I guess the mourning we need to do that around that. Also, we are in a pandemic, and there will be mourning of death and loss around that as well. I think Brenton's point about, as people, we need to turn up first and, bring all of ourselves to this issue. So the conversations I've been having over the last 3 or 4 weeks about, well, what is leadership in this space, what is future in this space, have been really interesting, because we are reverting. Some of us are going below the line. There are some bad behaviours turning up. But I've been very pleased to see that for most people, we're sitting in the discomfort, we're trying really hard to work it through, and we're bringing to bear all those things that have worked for us before. Now, some of those things will continue to work for us and some will not. So my provocation was around, when you're looking at the leaders around us, who have you recognised as being leaders, and who have you seen as being people in leadership roles? And the thing that's knocked me for 6 is how many people there are, not necessarily politicians, because I sort of expected a bit more, but in organisations who are people in leadership roles. We have not equipped them with the skills and capacities that they need to lead through this. And they're doing their absolute best, but it's becoming very obvious from the conversations I'm having with people in organisations that people leaders are struggling. So when you ask me around discovery, I guess where I went back to, well, what are the things that I go to? Where are the wells of inspiration that I look for in order to help me guide my practice and my consulting work? And so hope theory, futures and foresight is one of those wells. So futures and foresight is looking, I guess, from where we are today, understanding where that is, and then thinking about where we might like to be, where we think we will be, and where we don't want to be. And it's a rigorous process of both academic and active engagement in thinking and decision making. So there's that. I also have had quite a bit of involvement in around creating corporate and organisational cultures, because I think one of the things that's really turning up for me in a discovery sense is we often don't hold our cultural creation in our organisations as a conscious activity. It's something that we do in a pulse. So we pulse check, we engagement survey, we ask people how they're feeling, but we don't look at every micro interaction on a day-to-day basis as a way of creating culture. So when I saw Jacinda Ardern sitting on her couch in New Zealand having her YouTube chat in her pyjamas, well, her jumper, there's a micro intervention that she's taken the opportunity to turn up in a particular way that said to New Zealanders, we're all in this together, but also here's who we are and here's who we could be and here's how our relationship might, here's how it might look. And I think we can do that every day, all day, if we're consciously thinking about it first. So I guess they're the two things for me. The third thing is the leadership habits that we need to start to have a look at and start to create new habits around. So I'm a huge fan of Jennifer Garvey-Burge's work around leadership mind traps, and there's a lot of that going on. So as people try to take out for a walk the things that have worked for them in a non-crisis complex situation, they're finding that many of them aren't working for them. So, we're wanting to make simple stories out of everything. We're wanting to be right. We're wanting to not disagree. But actually, these things are not helping us. We need to be sitting in the complexity. We need to know when we're wrong and be holding our ideas lightly and prototyping and experimenting. So I guess that's, when you asked me to reflect, that's where I went. And I also, to Brenton's point, I think sometimes it's very difficult to ask people who are in trauma, and I don't think I know, it's very difficult to ask people who are in trauma and stressed to be creative and generative. And I think I agree with him wholeheartedly that maybe at this point, when we've all got our underpants on the outside and we're in crisis, we look to just sit and be, and just see what comes up. I'm involved in a lot of groups of people who are wanting to take lots of action. And I actually think the best action we could take at this moment is, apart from keeping ourselves safe and all those things that we need to do, is to just observe and see what's actually coming up.
Yeah, so there's a comment that's just come up, which is, accepting and letting go are great for the future, but they're very difficult, especially those who are experiencing loss and grief. And what can society do to support people emotionally? And Steve Cork has posted a note to say Tim Costello talked last week about the new rituals to deal with grief at many levels, which I think is, again, summing up a lot of the conversations that we're having. And also Bobby Sereni said, perhaps the great leaders at this time are those displaying characteristics of dismantling boundaries and then finding a balance of that, direction, compassion, creating meaning. There was a great article on the conversation, which I will find and post at another time, which talked about why Jacinda Ardern had, if you compare the messages of what she's doing, that's, there are 3 things that she's doing in that leadership capacity, which are, giving clear instructions, but showing huge empathy and helping us create meaning of things that are happening, which I think is a really nice reflection as well.
I had a beautiful moment with in my family. So I had a family member making a big decision, and it was a time-bounded decision. It couldn't be put off, and it was, it needed to happen on Friday. And there were financial implications, all sorts of things going on. And they asked me, what would you do? And I realised I had no idea. Like, nothing that I had experienced to the point in my life had given me the insight to know what to do next. So it was then, I guess it's that pattern interrupted. You've got life interrupted, but we spend a lot of our lives working through patterns that we've created in the past, and we actually need to recreate those patterns now for the future. So we had to go back to first principles and reason our way through, well, if it's this, is this scenario. And it was a lot of work and took a lot of time, but it just really brought it home for me about the work we have to do individually, collectively, and at global scale, and how much energy and effort that will take. And I think trying to do that when we're in the middle of loss and grieving is probably not the way to go.
I think when you were talking then, Rowena, I was thinking about neuroplasticity and our ability to think differently, the need to do that, and it's possible to think about that individually, though, of course, with everyone connected through social media and so forth, there's sort of this global neuroplasticity happening. And one of the things I'm curious if you don't mind is how does that fit in with hope and what's required from us to to be hopeful amidst all of this uncertainty?
So the thing that hope theory says, so it's a psychological theory developed about 30 years ago based on research and evidence. And what it talks about is, or what it tried to understand was how humans make goals and achieve them, basically. So hope theory says that when you're able to identify a goal, identify pathways to achieve it, and feel a level of agency around it, and you can successfully achieve one goal, you'll get positive emotional feedback, which will then make you feel better about the next. So basically this, and it becomes like muscle memory. You know, the more you goal, you think about pathways, you feel like you can do something, you achieve, you re-goal, you achieve. So it's, you know, if you had absolutely no hope whatsoever in terms of you felt like you couldn't do anything or achieve anything, you can start from that space. But, you know, most of us have had some sort of success around this. And one of the things I found as an intervention in my family is that we've, rather than having, you know, a year's worth of plans or whatever it is, we're coming down to a plan a day. So we've got some goals for the day, might be having a shower, might be getting out of bed, whatever it is, but just that successful goal attainment around, all right, well, I've done that. What's the next thing I can do? So the thing I really like about hope theory is that it's absolutely achievable, even in the depths of quite, you know, difficult circumstances. And it works. You know, it really does help you move yourself into a more positive frame of mind to then allow for more, I guess, of the external environment to let that back in.
Yeah, that reminds me of a video that Anad Jain and John Arden did on Instagram. They're from Superflux, and we've worked with them before at Mod, but well known for their futures and design work. And there was just a little comment which sort of says, you know, it's about choice. Uncertainty is discombobulating, but bringing uncertainty back to choice in the present is empowering. And, you know, our choices have changed, you know, and so this whole sort of thing around noticing what is there. I just think there's something interesting around being able to more deliberately, or more, as Brenton said, more broadly, if you think about Overton window, look at the choices that we have, and then being able to, you know, as Steve Cork said earlier, being able to present that way of being, or choosing a way of being that allows the future that we want to better unfold for us.
But also understanding that we create it. So the social construction of reality is a thing, as Brenton said. Yeah. So yes, we can recreate how we want the world to be now and into the future.
I think what's coming on from the chat is just a lot of resonance around the holding things lightly at the moment, and not expecting, I mean, this is my words now, but not expecting too much of ourselves right now. Like, I think, you know, we want to make space for the imagination, but that doesn't mean it has to be done now. We just want to make sure we're not closing off that. We want to make space for grief, and we should be doing that. We want to make space for you know, throwing out, dismantling things that aren't working, and doing that in a considered way, not in a rushed way. I'm just seeing if there's anything else that's come up. I think, yeah, just that ability to stop and observe. And I think that, I mean, that's the interesting question around leadership, right? Because usually, you know, the leader is seen as a moving thing, where you are bringing people towards a goal, or you are helping people see what might be possible. And at the moment, we actually just want, I get this feeling that we actually just need to sort of, as you said, Rowena, slow down, pause, or Brenton said earlier, notice. You know, that requires a different sort of leadership skill to let people be okay with sitting in the discomfort, and being okay with the noticing, and being okay with the future as it emerges, rather than necessarily, you know, hunting it down and going after it. Which they're different types of skills, or maybe not skills, but they're different emphases on what we might have otherwise expected from our leadership, I think.
And I think that notion of a state of leadership as well, you know, it's a particular approach to dealing with all of these things, holding things lightly, but also being respectful of the fact that there is a lot that people have let go, and that has an effect and
also,
sorry, go on.
I was going to say, and also being alert. You know, like, so Jared Thomas has just said, you know, we've worked with Jared at Mod, and he said, for Aboriginal people, this moment brings to mind the restrictions placed on our grandparents and the ongoing surveillance of our lives. And Dikani mentioned, you know, the devastation that many First Nations populations felt from colonisation with smallpox and measles and those sorts of things. So I think, you know, part of this is positive, you know, allowing us space to acknowledge those feelings and allowing us space to create something new. But the other part of that to me is the alertness of, you know, just making sure that we're doing whatever we're doing to protect everybody is done in a way that's not then really disadvantageous. So I keep thinking, Rowena, around, you know, that provocation that around, you know, who is the future you're creating, who are you creating it for, and who isn't it for, who are you leaving out? And I think that's sort of something we just really need to be super vigilant about at the moment, that we're not creating futures, you know, in our enthusiasm to dismantle and create new that then leave vulnerable people out, or leave people out without us acknowledging that that's what we're doing. I think we need to be much more cautious about that. So
I think too, I mean, yeah, this is an opportunity for us all to learn empathy. I mean, if you haven't been in a group of people that have experienced what it is to be on the edge, well, you are now. So what does that feel like, and how can you move that into your future leadership practice? And just on the, you know, here's a quote that we like. One of the things I really, you know, what's the thing that if you were going to discover it could help you lead yourself out of this space, is a beautiful quote from a leadership practitioner talking about know your purpose. It's the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. And I think that's just, you know, that just does it for me. Yep, let's get onto that. So thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Rowena. I really appreciate your joining us, and stick around, of course, and please do share that for the later incarnation of this in the future. And thanks, Jared, for your comments as well. One of the things I really love is acknowledging elders past, present and future. I think we're here to acknowledge the elders of the future, and many of those people perhaps are part of this very conversation. So really appreciate it. So with the way, and I might just hand to you momentarily, Kristen, just again, perhaps to get a perspective on Mod's version of this, because I want to bring in our recappers, the people who are going to help bring a futures perspective to this, and just reflect on a few things. So Kristen, I know with the penultimate exhibition that is now online as well, the 7 Siblings from the Future with Mod, this notion of identity and self-leadership and all of these things that you explore with the museum. What in terms of unlearning are you picking up from this that's exciting you for what Mod's doing next?
Oh, really good question. And look, I'm just being distracted by another comment, which I think is excellent, which is,
yeah, go for it.
Jose said, I think it's important to recognise that there's also many who can't afford or have the luxury to slow down and reflect. And, you know, so I think that's the thing that I'm finding. And she's right. You know, if you're in a medical role at the moment, the issues that you're solving are very front of face. And as Rowena said, though, you're not, or as we've said, you know, a lot of those aren't things that we've done, and our muscle memory might not be there to help us deal with them either. So I think what I'm learning the most of is that all of the assumptions that I make hold until they don't, and then you have to find new ways of knowing and being, which is good. I mean, I just think I know we're having kind of this longer discussion, and I think there is this point of crisis leadership, which, you know, the sorts of things that we've talked about in terms of, you know, clear direction and empathy and making meaning from the article and the conversation and the model of Jacinda Ardern's leadership at the moment are really important. There's that notion of being able to respond to people at the current situation, which is in one of either individual or more collective social trauma. But there is also that other question, which is what do we learn out of this particular moment, and how do we take that new model of leadership into what happens next? Because what happens past crisis will be different, and we can revert back to what's known. But for many people, that wasn't. It wasn't a useful place to be anyway. And I'm not sure that the type of leadership that was emerging in the last couple of years is really the leadership that we need to help us tackle climate and social inequity and, the equal distribution of food and all of those other sort of complex issues that occur because of our globalized, networked existence. So I am still curious about that longer term. What does it look like? And I think, a couple of things that Rowena said, which is around, maybe setting goals that are meaningful, even if that's a very short-term goal. I think the ability to challenge your assumptions and be wrong. Like, I've started a list of all of the things that I've gotten wrong. And that's just around exhibition design, which we should know by now, but they don't hold for the new environment. And I think we have to be much more willing to kind of let ourselves be challenged by the fact that we don't know, which is hard when those things kind of matter. The empathy keeps coming. I mean, we've talked a lot, I think, pre-pandemic about the importance of empathy in leadership and the importance of emotional intelligence, but I think this really sharpens that edge. That edge of it, so and forces us to kind of look beyond our boundaries, which is one of the comments that came up early, around the language of physical distancing versus social distancing. And while social distancing is the appropriate academic term, we actually want stronger social bonds and the physical distancing, and maybe that's also what we want. Is those maybe stronger social bonds in terms of our corporate and organisational and governmental leaders might be something that emerges from this in a different way. And I think the fact that we're seeing into each other's homes and seeing into each other's lifestyles and it is also challenging. So I read an article recently which looked at a community college in the US, and when everybody was turning up, there was this sense of equality amongst the students. You were coming there for a lecture, but when you start to zoom into people's homes, that sense of equality breaks pretty quickly because people are coming from a variety of backgrounds. And so what we do with that new knowledge, I think, is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I think that diversity is becoming more visible, which is fascinating and really interesting challenge around empathy.